Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and
on the last day of May 2020, the numbers continue to go up. 62 cases in the last 24 hours, 2 more deaths, bringing the total to 133. The vice president of the ruling party, SDSM, Muhammad Zakiri, and his wife and his 3-month-old daughter are among the latest and highest profile individuals to test positive for the coronavirus, and we do wish him and his family a speedy recovery. This was enough for President Pendarovski to, yet again, extend the state of emergency for another 14 days, bringing the total length of time of the state of emergency to 3 months. And yet the interim Prime Minister, Olaf Spasovski, at the bidding of the SDSM party boss, Zoran Zaev, still insists that elections go forward on July 5. And while we are on numbers, outgoing Defense Minister Radmila Sekerinska met this past week with Kichevo Mayor Fatmir Dahari, a former member of the UÇK NLA, the so-called National Liberation Army, liberation from what, they were never asked, with UÇK symbols and the flag of the Republic of Albania directly behind her in the picture that swept social media. She reopened old wounds and yet did not apologize. Instead, she said, quote, "The 2001 actions are far behind us. Our society has overcome the military crisis in a democratic and lasting way, as we are witnessing today, 19 years later, when we are a member of NATO. In 2020, the most important thing is whether politicians serve the citizens. Far behind us. Tell that to the families of the 15 Macedonian police officers killed and the 150 injured, the 43 Macedonian members of the army killed and the 119 injured, the 10 civilians killed, the 75 injured, the 20 civilians attacked and assaulted, the 20 civilians that were missing, and the hundreds of thousands of Macedonians negatively affected by this." We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Karolina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin calling in from the peak of Corona country, Skopje, Macedonia.
Peak of Corona, gosh, what is it? You guys can't shake this virus.
No, this is the Ramadan spike. This is the iftar spike. We had a whole month of, the Muslim month of Ramadan, and this includes Muslim men gathering every evening as soon as the sun sets, and mosques sound the muezzin call, and they go and have dinner. They're not allowed to eat during the day, and this turns into a loud feast. They're eating, they're drinking Coke, they're laughing, blah, 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 and this is apparently very conducive to spreading the virus. And the ministry is careful, unlike the US where they would say, okay, we have this many infected in the African community, this many infected in the Asian community. Here we're trying not to give the numbers, but they would just give it by municipality. And it's clear that it's either the densely populated aerodrome where I live, where you can get it through the elevators, sharing 50 apartments in one building, or the other 3 for so one case would be from aerodrome and 3-4 would be from Muslim majority parts of Skopje, where the people most likely got it through the iftar dinners, and they've been ignoring the rules obviously for a whole month, and this is the result. The numbers are almost as bad as at the height of the epidemic in April sometime.
Wow. Now, just to be clear, so first of all, and this is important, you mentioned that during these dinners they drink Coke, not Pepsi. Is that correct?
I think mostly Coke and Fanta.
That's not what I wanted to say, actually. You mentioned that it tends to be in areas where the Muslims have gathered for these dinners. As I mentioned in the monologue, the vice president of the ruling party, Citizen Muhammad Zakiri, is a observant Muslim, and he announced that his wife and his 3-month-old daughter have it. I guess he was taking part of that, as is custom there. The Minister of Health, Vinko Filipce, has he said anything specifically with regard to these dinners?
Vinko was very upfront condemning the church procession in Struga on St. George's Day. And then for the iftars, he afterwards, after the numbers were known, practically we've been in this situation for several days now, that we've had a spike in numbers. And before that, you had the iftars, but it takes a while, I guess, for the cases to accumulate. So nobody was complaining much. Afterwards, now that we see that the numbers are what they are, and they're likely going to postpone the elections because of this, and SDSM was hoping very much that the elections will take place as soon as possible, but now it's looking less and less likely. So Filipce did say a much more even-handed, obviously, how politicians are careful to criticize Muslims. He did say some people were not following the rules, and then immediately the entire SDSM PR machine for several days turned on the Interior Minister Naket Shulev, the only Vimera appointed major official in the government, and they've been accusing him of not breaking up the iftars by force, which obviously SDSM were hoping that a Vimera Interior Minister would do this, and then they would turn around and blame him for being heavy-handed and aggressive towards the Albanians. Philip just said no. I mean, obviously this is not something where the police should be the first resource. You need to persuade them, you need to talk to them, you have members of parliament, you have religious leaders, you have to reason with the people, and most of them are not even violating the law because this is done in a family gathering, in your house, in your yard, which is permitted. You're not forbidden from gathering your family in the evening at home. But yeah, SDSM were desperately hoping to, once they realized things are bad, they tried to pin this on Naket Shulev, and most ridiculously, it was Muhammad Zakiri who did much of this. He was accusing, the Vimera Interior Minister, who until yesterday, SDSM were accusing Vimera of doing this and that and the other to the Albanians, building up distrust among the Albanian community toward the police over Kumanovo, the Smikovsko massacre, the Good Friday massacre. So anything they can do to make Albanians distrust the police, and then all of a sudden, hey, let's send the police, break up the iftars, and maybe somebody gets killed or beaten up in the process. Police barging in people's homes while they're having dinner after being hungry all day long, and practically Zakiri was asking that Vimera saves him from himself, because he was apparently going from one iftar to another and caught the virus. So this is what SDSM has been trying to spin this. As soon as something bad happens involving the police, they blame it on Shulev, and whenever there is a drug seizure or something, then the remaining SDSM officials in the ministry, which are obviously in a high majority, then they are, they should be praised. But when something bad happens, they had a whole campaign that Naket Shulev deliberately sabotaged, and Vimera deliberately sabotaged their elections by, getting Albanians to gather 50 men in a yard and having dinner for 3 hours, 4 hours. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, I suppose that's to be expected from their side. And of course, as I mentioned in the opening monologue, the president has again extended the state of emergency. I should mention this is episode 74, and we're recording this on the very last day of May 2020. So May 31, we'll drop this on Monday, June 1. And yesterday, he had the party leaders meeting and agreed to extend the state of emergency for another 14 days. So 3 months. I mean, I remember, Cvetin, way back in 2001, during, and we'll get to this a little bit later here, during the height of the Uchka attack on Macedonia, President Pendarovski, was considering implementing a state of emergency, and yet during the entirety of the 2001 crisis, a state of emergency was never declared.
Yeah.
And yet you now we're 3 months. That's that's a quarter of a year that Macedonia will have been under a state of emergency because of this virus, which is just, when you think about it, politics aside, it's just kind of amazing to see that happen. And then you're going to come out of this on June 14, June 15, and then Citizen wants that election, with three weeks after that. But as you said, it looks increasingly unlikely.
Yeah, the numbers are bad. We have about 50 people diagnosed each day. Between 1 and 4, actually 5 was yesterday. 5 deaths a day. We had the first child to die of the disease. It's just a several months old baby who was sent to Switzerland for treatment and couldn't be helped. So the numbers are as bad as when we were shutting down cities. And currently there is no curfew, no restrictions on movement. We're just supposed to wear the masks when going to the shop or something. But it's possible that parts of Skopje get quarantined if this thing continues and the numbers continue to look bad. But yeah, Sekerinska today, Spasovski yesterday, they both came out. They made up a rule that as much work was done for the previous elections, for the previous election date, that this work is done and it's finished by the Electoral Commission, and that the remaining 22 days of this preparation of elections are all that needs to be done by the Commission after the state of normalcy resumes, and they have Stevan Pendarovski who can declare an end to the state of emergency whenever he wants to. So SDSM insists that as soon as Pendarovski declares an end to the state of emergency, these 22 days count off, and then we have elections, which is completely ludicrous way of looking at things, but the diplomats are supporting them.
Right, and as we've talked about before in this podcast, let's just assume for a moment that July 5 is the date, and that somehow the government, pushes this through. What about the internationals? I mean, ODIHR is supposed to, the OSCE monitoring mission is supposed to be there. They're not even, they might have a few people in the OSCE office there in Skopje, but they're supposed to bring in a whole bunch of short-term observers. Has there been any talk about that, or are they going to be able to bring them in that quickly?
We see the U.S. ambassador supporting this. We see the French ambassador, curiously, giving statements that we need a legitimate government, so basically encouraging elections sooner rather than later.
Meaning the current one is illegitimate?
Yeah, all of a sudden, now that, they probably sense, the U.S. embassy senses that SDSM has a chance in the elections if they can rig them enough, and if only 200,000 people vote, then all of a sudden this government has legitimacy issues. Let's not look into how it was formed, with what majority, and how it does not represent especially ethnic Macedonians, and how members of parliament were blackmailed to support it. Suddenly now it has legitimacy issues that holding Corona elections, as we like to call them now, in June could help. In July, could help Zaev get another 4-year term. This is going to get people killed. I mean, 35,000 people need to stay in the polling stations all day long and need to interact with everybody. These are the election commission organizers who are practically public government employees. These people will get the virus. That's a given. 35,000 of them.
Wow. Not to mention then obviously standing in line. What do you got to stand 2 meters apart and all the logistics around that. I don't know. To be fair, other nations are struggling with this as well. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do here. But our elections aren't until November. Although we've had the various primaries. Anyway, you mentioned a moment ago. You had mentioned Radmila Sekerinska, and of course we referred to her in the opening monologue. We can kind of pivot to that, which will then lead into NATO and some other issues we want to cover. So she met this past week. Radmila Sekerinska, the outgoing defense minister, met with the Kičevo mayor, Fatmir Dehari, who was a former member of the UÇK, the NLA, the so-called National Liberation Army. Led by Ali Ahmeti, who is now the leader of DUI, that attacked Macedonia in 2001. She was photographed with the mayor in front of the Učica symbol, the flag of the Republic of Albania, roundly criticized for this, and yet, of course, she doesn't apologize. As I mentioned, one of her quotes was, "The 2001 actions are far behind us." Well, yeah, far behind us, but, that's like saying 9/11 is far behind the Americans, and yet we still think about it every day, and 3,000 people were killed on that day, and the families of those who were lost live with that for the rest of their lives, and America lives with that for the rest of our lives, remembering exactly where we were on that day. And I mentioned some of the numbers. I have here let me pick it up. Given me by some friends, the White Book, Terrorism of the So-Called NLA, which is a very detailed book on the events of 2001 with some extremely graphic pictures, which I would never post. But again, 15 Macedonian police officers were killed, 150 injured, 43 members of the Macedonian army killed, 119 injured. And it's worth pointing out, especially of those two groups, those are Macedonians, those are ethnic Albanians, those are other minorities that are also Macedonian citizens, killed by the NLA, killed by Ali Ahmeti. And yet she goes and meets with this Kičevo mayor, who is a former terrorist, and doesn't apologize. What are Macedonians in Macedonia saying about this?
It's not that she met him, because obviously these people have been in the helm of the government for so long now, Ahmeti and the rest. We've
Right.
been sadly become accustomed to this, but he has his office in the mayor in the town hall in Kičevo, decked out like a Učica museum with all the
Right.
regalia, the double-headed black eagle with spread wings, etc. And if she took a picture outside or anywhere else, with any different background, nobody would notice this. But
Yeah, good point.
the fact that the office looks the way it does, and she's the defense minister, it's always a touchy point to have. It was a touchy point a touchy issue when Talat Jaferi was made defense minister, when Dui insisted that they have the defense ministry, and they nominated commander in Učica, a former commander in Učica, for this position. And it's still not clear what Dehari wants to get out of this. Sekerinska is obviously, she's campaigning in the 5th district, the southwest, which includes Kičevo now that the borders are being redrawn of the electoral districts. So she's campaigning in Kičevo. She's asking for what remains of the SDSM Macedonian vote there, but also the Albanian vote. Dehari is her competitor. He comes from Dui, and for Dui, Kičevo is very important. It used to be the main stronghold for Ali Ahmeti. This is where they do get most of the votes, and they do most of the ballot stuffing historically. So Dehari may have done this to harm a competitor for Albanian votes, because Macedonians have been outraged by this. This district covers Bitola, Ohrid, so people there have been outraged. It's possible that she was trying to get Dehari to switch sides, to ally with her, with SDSM, although I'm not sure how he stands in Dui, if this is even possible. But mostly by Dehari's face, he was grinning, he was dominant, he was, look how I'm humiliating the Macedonian defense minister, having her take pictures next to the Učica symbols, and you even through the mask you could see that he's grinning and he's smugly self-satisfied. So maybe it was mostly about him having to humiliate another Macedonian politician who has to come cap in hand for Albanian votes in Kičevo.
Yeah, well, Kičevo is, so Ali Ahmeti is from the village of Zayas, right?
Zayas,
and which is near Kičevo.
Yeah.
And it's worth remembering. I just put out an article on Medium, and I've got a lot of stuff in my files, quotes and things from way back when. In March 22, 2001, in the magazine Newsweek, article is called "A Troubled Dream." The author's David Binder, and he quotes Ahmeti as saying, quote, "Our aim is solely to remove Slav forces from territory which is historically Albanian." So that's March 22, 2001. And I've got other quotes here as well from March and different other Albanians that were part of the NLA Učica, basically who said the same thing. And this, it's worth remembering, and of course George Robertson, who was then the Secretary General of NATO, called the NLA a bunch of murderous thugs and criminals. The State Department at the time called them ethnic Albanian extremists. The Presidency of the European Union called them men of violence, because in March of 2001, that's what they were. They, Ahmeti at least was honest. He wanted to divide Macedonia in two. And then when the war did not go their way, it certainly didn't go the way of the Macedonian army, they changed their tune and said, no, we're fighting for rights and blah, blah, blah. Well, in a democratic society, you don't pick up guns and shoot your way to get rights. That's not the way a democracy works. And if you do get those rights through the use of force, that then damages that democracy, those institutions, far into the future, which is 19 years later, which is what we are seeing today. Institutions, the state of democracy in Macedonia is damaged because of those events in 2001 and because of ultimately the response of the international community. The international community at first was correct. The NLA, Učica, should have been obliterated. And at the time, the international community, the European Union, NATO, the U.S. were saying these people can never be in positions of power. Okay, the rank and file, fine, grant them an amnesty. But the leadership, Ali Ahmeti, no, never. They should have been arrested. Of course, in this country, the United States of America, we have the death penalty. They should have been executed. You Europeans are a little bit wimpy on the death penalty, but that's your problem. And yet, they're in positions of power. And what that does is that damages the institutions of democracy. I mean, everybody keeps, we've heard over the past 19 years, and I'm on a bit of a rant right now, about reconciliation. Politicians and bureaucrats calling for reconciliation because of the actions of 2001. You cannot have reconciliation unless somebody admits that they were wrong and asks for forgiveness, and then that forgiveness is granted. That's the only way you can have reconciliation. You can't just say, let's have reconciliation. It doesn't work that way. And so they're missing the point. You cannot have reconciliation unless there is an admission of guilt, a request, an apology and a request for forgiveness, and the granting of that forgiveness. And so that is why you will never have reconciliation over the events of 2001 in Macedonia.
Yeah.
Anyway, end of rant.
And worst thing for Sekerinska is this happened at the time when she was trying to again have us join NATO. This never-ending joke here that every other day we are joining NATO again and again, and SDSM is celebrating this over and over again. And this happened literally on the day when she had several U.S. bombers, B-1, these big strategic nuclear-capable bombers, fly over from Dakota to through the Balkans toward Russia, and they were apparently, I guess, intercepted and flew back from Russian or Ukrainian airspace, I'm not sure. But they flew over Skopje. They deliberately made the sound, I guess they can rev the engines or whatnot. And this was announced like a flyover in honor of Macedonia's entry into NATO. So she was promoting this. She met the US ambassador in front of the government building to say we took part, we contributed to the US flyover, I don't know how, by waving at them, I guess, or not shooting them down, I suppose. But this was supposed to be this week's feel-good moment for the government that we are in NATO, and then like an hour later it was completely obliterated by the pictures of Sekerinska with the Učica flag, which again, given the US support for the Učica in Kosovo before this, and it just all put together does nothing for even without the Učica flag. Macedonians had very mixed feelings about the flyover, especially after it became clear it resulted, it was heading toward Russia, and it resulted in some kind of a, I called it on Twitter, measuring contest with all the stuff we're dealing with right now, and the US is dealing with, and etc. And we are here now oh, look at my shiny plane, and the U.S. Embassy was retweeting some stupid tweet from a bonehead idiot here who said, oh, the Americans have better planes than the Russians, and the Russian embassy before that was tweeting, oh, we intercepted them, they couldn't. Like, Jesus, my God, this is so annoying.
It is annoying. I noticed that Kate Burns, my ambassador in Skopje, I think she retweeted a tweet, and she said something about this is an example of the ever-deepening friendship, quote-unquote, between Macedonia and the U.S., although I think she used the emoji. But it is not, if Macedonia, and again, Macedonians want to join NATO, yes, but not at the price of changing their names. And so it was basically engineered that Macedonia would join NATO and pay the price of changing its name and its history and its identity, etc. So if Macedonia joining NATO, she says that Macedonia joining NATO is an example of the deepening friendship. But if it's required for a country to join NATO with an unacceptable price, if that's friendship, then she doesn't have a very good idea of what friendship is. I mean, it would have been more accurate for her to say, this is an example of self-interest on behalf of the United States. That would be a correct statement, because it is self-interest, without going into all the details of Russia and the Cold War, etc., etc. But two countries can certainly be friends without one country being forced to join NATO at the price of giving up its name, its identity, its history, and everything else. But look, I mean, we know that what the U.S. ambassadors are there for. They're all the same to varying degrees. She'll be gone soon, one day, just like all the others, but Macedonia will continue.
They're all the same.
They are, yeah. So.
I hear a few countries in the region who say that they've seen some change once the ambassador has been replaced by ostensibly a Trumpian ambassador, and obviously Grenell is one of his 50 jobs for Trump is tackling the region, but there's very little to expect from any new U.S. ambassador. If you're a Macedonian right now, they get the support for, the U.S. embassy here is supported by the Albanians, by the Macedonian left, when the U.S. embassy is funding them and bringing them, helping them grab power through violent protests, similar to the ones we're now seeing in the U.S. But, we could notice, I mean, this was interesting to look at. There were some tweets on the Macedonian left in support of Sekerinska. Obviously, this is in the flyover. This is what the people on Twitter, work. They work for the government. It's their job to support this. But then most on the left, and some cases both people who supported the flyover, who praised the flyover, but then much of the left then went immediately back to tweeting how racist America is, how the killing of this horrible killing of this guy in Minnesota, and so it's moving from praising America to America is racist. Look what they're doing to their blacks, and this is the type of people that support the embassy here, Albanians, and this faithless leftists who were elevated through the colored revolution. And if I were, an American strategist concerned about having long-term influence over Macedonia, I'd be, very worried about my future prospects.
Well, yeah, you make a good point. But going back to the ambassador, of course, she is Kate is not a political appointee. She's career. All the ambassadors that have been and ever will be future to Macedonia will be career, meaning that they've been in the State Department for at least 25, 30 years. They all graduated from Harvard or Yale. They all have a similar worldview of a far leftist worldview. So you're never going to get a political appointee to Macedonia, at least probably not in our lifetime. So they're all from the same mold. But to the left there, the so-called colorful revolutionaries, and you mentioned that they've got this push me, pull you type of thinking of calling America racist and then cheering the flyover. And I think, their heads they're going to pop veins in their heads pretty soon if they keep doing this. I see over in Slovenia, the far left there was chant at the U.S. Embassy there in Ljubljana, chanting, "F the police," etc. I don't expect that the colorful revolutionaries in Macedonia would do that to the American embassy, because the American embassy supports them in various ways.
It's where they work.
That's true, unfortunately.
But yeah, it's a complete mess. The left here was so eager to blame even the corona spread on the Christian right. They were shouting over the Easter services, the communion with the spoon, and then over the Struga procession. But they, very muted criticism of the way the iftars were conducted, and if they give it, it has to be couched in a well, look, all these religious people are the same, and look how they brought the corona on us, the enlightened urban dwelling people who are careful, who take precautions. And yeah, we have the culture war in full swing here. Like, you have it over there, and one side has a complete lack of self-awareness and is just driving straight through the ideological road lines and swerving from one lane into the next, like literally with every other comment they make. They just, one day they're pro-Yugoslav Serbs, the next they're Bulgarians, one day they're writing in Nova Macedonia, the old communist newspaper we had here, about the coming collapse of America through racial riots and the collapse of NATO in the 60s, mind you. And the next they're giving up their national identity to become part of NATO, while at the same time still promoting the topic, the talking point that America is going to collapse through racial riot. So it all exists within the same, the confines of the same head. It's such, I can't begin to imagine what kind of mess they have in their brains. But
yeah, these are a confused and lost, in every sense of the word, lost people. It's a shame, speaking as a conservative American, to see how our government has been complicit in supporting these and financially and otherwise the far left in the country, especially the countries of Eastern Europe, which lived under brutal totalitarianism for so long, and then got the chance to experience freedom. And yet, the ironic thing is that under their plan, their policy prescriptions for their governments, they would ultimately become totalitarian again. And that's the funny thing, I think, about the left, is that they just don't quite understand that. This is something that our friend Jordan P. Peterson has been talking about a lot lately. Other authors, Ryszard Legutko, the Polish philosopher and MEP, and others have been, and he has lived under a totalitarian state, under communism, and is warning that this is coming again through the policies of the left. Anyway, that battle will continue as long as we live, Cvetin. I don't know if that's good news or bad news, but that's just the news.
Now Trump is declaring war on Antifa, so we'll see what will come of it, what resources he actually can put to this fight.
It'll be interesting, just slightly switching subjects, because of the events that are going on in the United States right now with the riots, which started there in Minneapolis and have spread all over the country now. I think Amy Klobuchar, as a potential vice presidential pick for Joe Biden, is completely dead, because I think she was, and I've got my facts probably got my facts a little bit wrong on this. I think she was the state attorney general, but this one cop who was responsible who had his knee on the deceased's neck. He was in trouble a lot, and she never prosecuted him. So she's on the wrong side of their side on this issue. Same with Kamala Harris. So I think they're both dead in the water in terms of VP picks. So, I'm hoping Crazy Uncle Joe picks a real radical for his vice. It's
going to have to be a black woman, and he said a woman, and now
Stacey
it
Abrams
has to be a black person. That Georgia woman.
She thinks she's the governor of Georgia. Yes. So.
Yeah.
She's
Or
not.
Michelle Obama.
No, she doesn't want it. She doesn't want it. I'd be very surprised.
Well, but she might have to take it. I mean, and then Biden will be gone, likely sooner rather than later, and have the second Obama administration.
Yeah, no. The conventional wisdom on both sides, the left and the right, the Republicans and the Democrats, is that Biden's just a placeholder. If he wins the presidency, he'll be president for less than 2 years. Yeah. He'll either die or be declared non compos mentis, or something else. So anyway, that's the that's the balance of 2020. What we have to look forward to. However, let me just one bit of bright news. I don't know if you watched the launch yesterday of Dragon. SpaceX.
Oh yeah, that was nice. Yeah.
That was fantastic. The first time since 2011 when America went back into space with humans. We
Yep.
2 men up. The capsule linked up with the space station, I guess this morning our time. But that was just.
Did it? I think it's still flying. I think it.
No, I think they did. I think they did link up. It was only a 19-hour trip, so. Anyway, that was just fantastic to watch. Think about it. In 10 minutes, we took this gigantic rocket with 2 men at the top, sitting on explosive fuel, put them up, 150 miles above the Earth, took the main stage of the rocket, brought it back down to Earth. It landed on a floating platform in the ocean to be reused again. All within 10 minutes.
I didn't know I kind of forgot they land those things. I seen the image, but I wasn't sure what the heck. If it's a meme I'm seeing. Yesterday I finally Googled it well, and I realized they actually land the rocket back clean it up, refuel it, and then launch it again.
Yes, that's the whole point. That's what both Elon Musk, who is SpaceX, and Jeff Bezos, who is I forgot the name of his company.
Blue something, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, the whole point is to be able to land to reuse those rockets. So it's a Crew Dragon is the name of the actual spaceship. It did dock with the International Space Station already. So.
Yeah. And they tell you marijuana smoking people can't amount to anything and can't get anything done, and then you see Elon Musk.
Be careful, you might be giving Zoran Zaev there some ideas. So.
Yeah.
Oh, what else is going on?
Beautiful.
It's June 1 tomorrow. Well, we're talking now on May 31, but when people hear our voices, it will be June 1, the traditional start of summer. I know that borders are starting to open up. When are the Greeks opening their borders?
I think they're supposed to make the decision. Not sure actually. I think they decided they're going to open it for us with no strings attached.
Okay.
I'm not sure when this starts. There's a big fight over Montenegro, which is being prickish to some countries. Like they won't let Serbs in, they wouldn't let us, and then they eventually said we'll let you in. But they're not that big of a tourism destination for us. Greece is the big one, obviously. But I don't know. We are doing everything we can to get them to close it because the numbers like this are really dreadful. But yeah, they will. It's very important for the Macedonian, the Greek part of Macedonia, for their economy there to have us overspending on €1.5 lokumadas donuts and €2.5 gyros all day long, and
I do miss that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll get down there this summer. I've been getting a bit old for summer vacation anyway. I've been feeling the need to go more to the mountains than to the sea for several years now.
You need to go
especially now with this condition. Yeah.
This is becoming a running gag on this podcast.
I've been reading up on the tourism amenities offered there. Yeah, I might eventually go there and send you a picture.
Please do. Actually, I think our friend Chris Deliso, when he was writing for Lonely Planet, visited there and contributed part of it. There was a hotel there, an old commie hotel. I forgot the name of it.
Yeah, Zingo owned.
Sorry?
Silex probably.
Yeah, it was redone apparently. So it's and this is years ago, so I'm very curious to go see it. What a great little town, though. So
Zingo has a Krater hotel. Zingo is the feudal lord of Kratova.
Yes.
And he owned everything since, first elected in the Yugoslav parliament in the 1960s. Still alive, God bless him.
Wow.
ran a small socialist party until recently. And actually a stand-up guy eventually. Turned out to be a stand-up guy. And, he would own everything in Kratov, and he would open up hotels called Krater after Kratov, and ran the Silex football club and all sorts of other things. SDSM went down on him hard. They wanted to destroy him real bad.
Naturally.
Because of the TV station he owns, the biggest TV station in Macedonia, Citel. And but he held his ground. I mean, to a degree. I mean, Citel is not what it used to be, but he largely held his ground. He had 3 top party officials from a very small party arrested by SDSM, charged on stupid things and idiotic things, and he held their ground even better than some in the Vemerod did, actually.
Interesting. Well, I do hope you get to, if you don't go to G in Macedonia, I hope you do go to Kratovo, and I hope folks do take the opportunity to travel around Macedonia this summer and see the beauties of the country.
Hey, what's our alternative?
True. Yeah.
It's quite possible we get locked down in our municipalities. That's one of the plans. People from Aerodrome in Skopje stay in Aerodrome. Don't go to Center for coffee. You're messing up our statistics in Center. So this is like New York. I mean, New Yorkers went across the U.S. and infected everybody, and you get it from the high rises, I suppose,
right,
and from all the clustered living. And we in parts of Skopje where we are actually clustered, especially where I live, and we are a risk factor, and they might even lock us down. It might be an adventure going, 3 blocks down from where I live to the park. That might be our summer vacation, the way things stand right now.
Well, that and you'll be locked down, and you'll hold elections at the same time.
Yeah, they only let us to go out to vote. That's it.
Oh, goodness.
Such a circus.
Yeah. Well, what else we got to talk about?
We had the Reis removed, the head of the Islamic Community, the guy
that's right. Yes.
Was cursing Macedonians, who was threatening to turn Macedonia into Bangladesh, who married a woman 50 years younger than him, a few days before the end of the iftar, and then declared his victory over the coronavirus on the day of the Ramadan Bayram, the Eid, al-Fitr, what's it called? And then the next day he was removed from office by the Riyasat, the heads of the community. We have Gorian Tozia from the Film Fund going crazy on us. He starts ranting against Croatia. He wants them... everybody in Croatia is a Nazi, is an Ustasha. He says, so now the Croats want him removed, and they're calling for the head of the Macedonian Film Fund, person who actually produced this movie that Bulgarians are so upset about, a third half. So now there are 2 countries in the Balkans who want him killed. We have Gligor.
Gligor, that's right, yes. Gligor Tashkevich, our old friend, former Minister of Foreign Investments way back when, was in the New York Times this week. Caught up in a scandal to sell really expensive personal protective equipment, PPE, to the city of New York.
Hoarding it,
selling it at a 200% markup or something. So I didn't get, it was only a couple of stories, but not quite sure what his role is in that. But I think the New York City attorney was going to charge him and some others. I'm not sure where that's going. Sad.
Yeah, he always, he doesn't look like a savvy businessman to me. I guess he was being swindled by these guys who were selling the equipment, and I think it said that he eventually backed out of the deal. He doesn't, he's literally the person you would expect this to happen to. If you,
right.
From anybody in our government, this is the person who would, I can see some of them being organizers in this kind of a deal, but I can see Gligor being suckered into this.
Right. Yeah. I think, and that's why it's sad.
Yeah, he comes from a very prominent family, but
Indeed,
communist dissidents
Yep.
who were supposed to, like, even the U.S. was grooming them for a while to, if Macedonia splits from Yugoslavia, and checking out if they have what clout they have. His grandfather fled Yugoslavia, from the communists, and his grandmother was, I think, imprisoned by them. They were fleeing through Istanbul, Cairo, the usual route, and ended up in New York. So, yeah, very prominent family, but Gligor is kind of like a, klutz.
Yeah, so, the sweet dunce, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one as well, but at least I'm aware of my limitations.
Well, again, this is a podcast from a conservative viewpoint. It's important. We as conservatives know that we have limitations, and we're aware of the limitations, and we have a certain amount of humility, of course. And we all have our faults and foibles and limitations, and as long as we're aware of those and try not to exceed those and have a bit of a humble spirit, then we're doing okay. So,
but
anyway.
It's hard with this Macedonian government, seeing how limited they are. I'm kind of getting a bigger appreciation of my own abilities, seeing that Zaev and Oliver Spasovski got to be prime ministers of the country.
Yes.
I'm kind of starting to feel better about myself.
Very good. All right, I think that's a full wrap for this episode. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about next week.
We have it all covered for now.
Yep.
What our numbers are next week.
Indeed, yes. Well, yeah, sad. That's one of those statistics you don't want to have to look at, but anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, we will talk to you next week. Yep.
Yeah, hang in there with all the rioting and all the looting.
Thank you. Yeah, pretty peaceful here in Arizona, so...
Yeah, what's there to loot in the desert?
Too hot, actually. Too bloody hot out here.
Oh, yeah.
So,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Maybe in the evenings.
No, even then, it's too bloody hot. So, anyway. All right, Cvetin. Good talking to you.
You too, buddy. Take care.
You too.